When I was younger, I always thought that when people said money changed families, it was just an exaggeration. But as I got older, as I built a life, a home, and yes, some wealth, I realized how terrifyingly true that saying could be. I'm 68 now. My name's Margaret, and I spent most of my life teaching at the local elementary school. My husband David passed away 10 years ago, leaving me with our modest home and a few investments we'd carefully built over the years. We never had the luxury of wasting money, but we were smart. Every little thing we owned, every antique, every stock certificate, every bit of land, was earned through patience, sacrifice, and trust. After David's passing, my world became quieter. My children, Amanda and Christopher, started visiting less. It was understandable. They had their own lives, their families, their dreams. But over time, something changed. The warmth faded, replaced by polite distance, and then subtle tension. It started when I mentioned, offhandedly, that I was revising my will. Suddenly, they became attentive again, calling, checking in, asking if I needed help. I wanted to believe it was love, but something in their tone, in their eyes when they visited, told a different story. One afternoon, Amanda came over with her husband Gary. She wore a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mom," she said gently, "you know you're not getting any younger. It might be time to think about simplifying things." I asked what she meant. "You know," Gary chimed in, "the house, the land, all those old things Dad left behind. Maybe sell them, move to a retirement community. It'll be easier for everyone." "Easier for who?" I asked quietly. Amanda hesitated. "For you, of course." But I saw the flicker in her expression. This wasn't about making my life easier. It was about positioning herself to inherit what she assumed was a fortune. Christopher wasn't much better. He didn't even try to hide his intentions. "Mom," he said bluntly one day, "you don't need to cling to all this. Just tell us what goes to who, so there aren't any surprises later." The irony made me laugh inside. They thought they knew everything about my life, about what I had. But the truth was, they knew nothing. Because while they were busy assuming I was just an old woman with a fading mind and a few dusty possessions, I had spent the past decade quietly building something far bigger, something David and I started long ago. We had invested in a small piece of land outside town. Back then, it was worth next to nothing, just a wide stretch of fields and trees. But 2 years after David's death, that land became the foundation of a commercial complex. Restaurants, offices, stores, the value skyrocketed. And because the deed was under both our names, then later transferred solely to mine, no one but me knew about it. Not Amanda, not Christopher, not their spouses. It was my quiet secret. You see, David always said, people's true nature shows when there's something to gain. I used to think he was cynical. Now, I see he was wise. When I got older, I started noticing how my children treated me differently depending on what they thought they'd get from me. Amanda, the sweet one, started making decisions for me. My meals, my doctor, even my friends. Christopher grew distant but calculating. When he did visit, he'd peek around the house like he was taking inventory. They both believed the same thing, that when I died, they'd split my estate. But I had other plans. I decided to test them, to see if there was any love left underneath the greed. So I let a rumor slip. During one Sunday lunch, I said, almost casually, "I've decided to donate most of my assets to charity." The silence that followed was deafening. Forks froze midair. Amanda's face fell, and Christopher's jaw tightened. "What?" Amanda said, forcing a laugh. "You're kidding, right?" "I'm serious," I said softly. "There's no reason for me to keep so much. There are people who need it more than we do." Christopher stood up abruptly. "That's ridiculous, Mom. Dad would never have agreed to that." I looked at him for a long time. David would have wanted me to follow my heart. That night, neither of them called me. A week later, I received a letter, hand-delivered by Amanda. It was polite, carefully worded, but I could read between the lines. She and Christopher wanted me to appoint an executor, someone neutral, to manage my estate. They claimed it was to avoid confusion. But I saw it clearly for what it was, an attempt to control my assets before I was even gone. I didn't sign anything. 2 months passed, and their visits grew colder. Until the day came when Christopher burst through my door shouting, "We need to talk." He had found out from a family friend that I'd sold part of the property, the old house. He assumed I'd sold everything and pocketed the money secretly. "Where's the money, Mom?" he demanded. I looked him straight in the eyes. "You don't need to worry about that." His voice cracked. "We're your children." "Yes," I said quietly. "But lately, I'm not sure you remember what that means." That was the breaking point. Amanda stopped speaking to me entirely. Christopher left in anger. And suddenly, I was alone again, like I had been after David's death. It hurt, of course, but part of me felt a strange calm, because now I knew the truth. And the truth was, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Not anymore. Still, I had one last thing to do. One last test. When I turned 70, I arranged a family meeting. I sent invitations to Amanda, Christopher, and even their children. I told them it was about the estate. I knew those words would make them show up. And they did, right on time. Amanda was dressed like she was attending a corporate meeting. Christopher brought his lawyer. They thought this was the day they'd finally claim what they believed was theirs. But what they didn't know was that this was the day they'd discover who I really was, and just how much they'd underestimated me. They arrived on a Sunday morning. The air was tense. Polite smiles stretched too tightly over anxious faces. I'd prepared coffee and tea, just as I always had when family came over. Though this time, I knew the warmth of the aroma wouldn't hide the chill in their intentions. Amanda set her designer purse on the table with a sharp thud, glancing around the living room as if evaluating the furniture's resale value. Christopher stood by the window, phone in hand, pretending not to notice me watching him. His lawyer, a young man in a pressed navy suit, adjusted his tie and smiled awkwardly. "Mom," Amanda began, forcing a tone that sounded rehearsed. "We're glad you called us here. It's good that we can finally put things in order." "In order?" I repeated softly. "Is that what you think this is about?" She blinked, caught off guard. "Well, yes. You said it's regarding the estate." I nodded slowly. "It is, but not in the way you think." End quote. Christopher turned around, eyebrows raised. "What's that supposed to mean?" I gestured toward the table, where an envelope sat neatly in front of each of them. "Before we talk, I want you both to open those." They exchanged a glance, one part suspicion, one part curiosity, and sat down. The sound of paper tearing filled the room. Inside each envelope was a single sheet of paper. No legal language, no monetary figures, just words, written in my hand. "What is the value of a mother's love to you?" Amanda's face tightened. Christopher frowned. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked. "No," I said calmly. "It's a question. One you should have asked yourselves long before this day." Amanda scoffed. "Mom, if this is another one of your moral lessons..." "It's not a lesson," I interrupted softly. "It's a mirror." For a long moment, there was silence. The only sound was the ticking clock on the wall, one David had given me for our 25th anniversary. I looked at them, really looked, and saw not my children, but strangers shaped by years of resentment, greed, and entitlement. Somewhere along the line, love had turned transactional. "You both stopped visiting, unless there was something to gain," I said. "Stopped calling, unless there was news about the will. You treated me like a gatekeeper to your inheritance, not your mother." Amanda's eyes glistened briefly. Whether from guilt or anger, I couldn't tell. "That's not fair, Mom. We care about you." "Do you?" I asked quietly. "When was the last time you asked how I was feeling? Not what I was doing with my money?" Christopher sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "All right, fine. Maybe we handled things wrong. But you can't blame us for wanting security. It's not like you ever told us what's really going on with your finances. We just want to know what's going to happen when you're gone." The bluntness of his words cut deep, but I didn't flinch. "You're not the first to worry about inheritance, but but you might be the first to forget that the person leaving it is still alive. For a long, tense silence, nobody spoke. Then I stood and walked toward the cabinet in the corner. I pulled out a thick binder, aged, worn, full of documents. "This," I said, placing it on the table, "is everything David and I built over 40 years. Investments, land deeds, business partnerships, it's all here." Their eyes widened. I continued, "You see, your father was a visionary. While everyone else spent, he saved. While others bought comfort, he bought potential. Together, we built something we wanted to pass down. Not just money, but wisdom, responsibility." Amanda leaned forward eagerly. "So, there's still property? Assets?" I smiled faintly. "Yes, quite a lot, actually." Christopher exhaled, a mixture of relief and triumph washing over his face. "Then let's just make it official, Mom. We can divide things equally. Make sure everything's handled fairly." "That's exactly what I plan to do," I said. "But first, you need to hear the terms." Amanda's excitement faltered. "Terms?" I nodded. "When I said this estate was empty, I meant empty of love, not value. But it can be full again if you prove you remember what family means." They exchanged a confused look. I took a deep breath. David and I created something before he died. A trust. It holds everything. Every asset, every dollar. But it doesn't release a single cent until certain conditions are met. "What kind of conditions?" Christopher demanded. "Simple," I replied. "You two must spend an entire year working together. Not in an office, not with lawyers, but running the old community center, our foundation. You'll volunteer there, manage it, rebuild it. If, after 1 year, the Board of Trustees agrees that you've done it with integrity and cooperation, you'll inherit everything." Amanda blinked. "You're serious?" "As serious as I've ever been," Christopher scoffed. "That's ridiculous. You're making us work for our inheritance?" "No," I said, looking him in the eye. "I'm asking you to earn it." He slammed his hands on the table. "You can't manipulate us like this, Mom." I didn't raise my voice. "If you walk away, you get nothing. That's your choice." Amanda looked torn, caught between pride and greed. "Why are you doing this?" "Because," I said softly, "I want to see if there's still any part of you that remembers who you were before money blinded you." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, sensing this was far beyond any legal negotiation he'd prepared for. Christopher shook his head. "I don't need this. You're just trying to control us from beyond the grave." Amanda whispered, "Chris, stop." "No," he snapped. "She's been playing games with us for years." He stormed toward the door, but before he could leave, I said, "You might want to hear the rest." He froze, hand on the doorknob. "The trust," I said, "also includes a clause. If either of you refuses to participate, their share automatically goes to charity. The other gets everything." Silence. Amanda's lips parted slightly. "Everything?" I nodded. Now Christopher turned around, his anger faltering into disbelief. "You'd really do that to your own son?" "I'm not doing anything," I said gently. "You are. Every choice has a price." For the first time that morning, neither of them spoke. I poured myself a cup of tea, my hand steady despite the weight of the moment. "You wanted clarity," I said. "Now you have it. The question is, what will you do with it?" They both sat in silence, lost in thought, each calculating their next move. But I knew this wasn't about the money anymore. It was about truth. And the truth was, they were about to find out what legacy really meant, one way or another. Christopher was the first to break the silence. He paced back and forth across the living room like a caged animal, running a hand through his hair, muttering something under his breath. Amanda sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, gripping the envelope as if it might anchor her. Her eyes darted between me, Christopher, and the binder on the table. The binder she clearly believed held the map to her future wealth. But what she didn't understand yet was that this wasn't about money. Not truly. This was about the past, the wounds that had been ignored, the love that had been taken for granted. Christopher finally stopped pacing. "This is manipulation," he said sharply. Dad would never have set up something like this. He did, I replied gently. We did it together. Amanda swallowed hard. But why? Why make us jump through hoops? We're your children. You used to be, I whispered. Amanda's brows knit together. What does that mean? It means, I said, that somewhere along the line you stopped being my children and became opportunists circling something you think you deserve. And I need to know whether there's anything left underneath that greed. Amanda flinched as if I had slapped her. Christopher just stared, his face unreadable. I continued, this isn't punishment. It's proof. For you and for me. Amanda let out a shaky breath. Mom, we've had our disagreements, but you can't deny we love you. Love doesn't vanish when money leaves the room, I replied softly. What you two showed me these last few years, it wasn't love at all. It was calculation. Christopher scoffed again, his favorite gesture whenever he was trapped. You're being dramatic. We were trying to help you. I tilted my head. By suggesting I sell my home, move into a facility, sign over decision-making power? That was for your safety, he snapped. Was it? I asked. He had no answer. I sat down across from them. Children don't get to demand their inheritance. They earn trust, love, and responsibility. I'm giving you both a chance to show you still have that. Amanda stared at the floor. Christopher stared at the door. You have until tomorrow to decide, I said. If you walk away, the trust dissolves, and every asset goes to charity, exactly as the clause states. Amanda looked up sharply. Tomorrow? That's not enough time. It's more than enough, I replied. If this is about money to you, you'll say yes instantly. If it's about resentment or entitlement, you'll walk away instantly. Either way, the truth won't take long to show. Christopher rubbed his forehead. So, we run the community center. For a year. Together. And then we inherit everything? Only if the board confirms you did it sincerely, I said. The board includes people who knew your father. People who know me. They're good judges of character. Christopher muttered a curse. You're asking the impossible. No, I said firmly. I'm asking for effort. Amanda hesitated, then whispered, Mom, what if we fail? Then the money goes to people who will use it with gratitude. Amanda covered her face with her hands. Christopher stared at the binder like it might magically open itself. His lawyer shifted nervously, clearly realizing this meeting had nothing to do with legal technicalities and everything to do with emotional reckoning. Finally, after several long minutes, I stood. Let me show you something. I walked toward the hallway and retrieved an old, dusty photo frame. Inside was a picture of Amanda and Christopher, around ages 10 and 12, hugging me during a picnic. Their smiles were genuine, their eyes bright, their hands gripping me with uncomplicated love. I placed it on the table. You see this? I said softly. This is the last time I remember you loving me without expecting anything in return. Everything after that turned into deals, expectations, questions about money. Amanda's eyes filled. That's not true. It is, I said calmly, and deep down you know it. Christopher swallowed hard. Mom, you can't judge us for wanting security. The world is different now. Harder. And you think it was easy for us? I asked. We lived through layoffs, medical bills, recessions, but we never once saw you and thought, what can we gain? That's the difference. Amanda wiped her eyes. So what happens now? You decide, I said. Stay and rebuild the community center, or walk away empty-handed. Christopher crossed his arms. Why that place? Why the center? Because, I replied with a tired smile, that center is where your father and I built everything. It's where he taught kids math after school, where I taught reading programs, where we set up our first charity events. It's where our marriage grew stronger. It's where you two learned what kindness meant. Before you forgot. Amanda closed her eyes. Christopher looked away. Neither had an argument left. After a while, Amanda whispered, Can we see the center? I hoped you'd ask, I said. We drove separately. The center sat on the edge of town. Once vibrant, now worn but still standing strong. Faded murals painted by local kids adorned the walls. The playground out back needed repairs, and the small garden David had planted years ago was overrun with weeds. "This place," Amanda murmured. "It feels smaller." "It's not smaller," I said. "You just grew larger than your memories." Christopher walked inside and looked around. Dusty chairs, an old piano, cracked tiles, but on the walls hung dozens of photos. Children's recitals, Christmas food drives, tutoring sessions, community fairs. "That's you," I said, pointing to a photo of him holding a trophy he'd won during a charity basketball tournament. "Remember that?" He nodded slowly. Something softened in his expression, something he'd buried long ago. Amanda found a photo of herself teaching a younger girl how to paint. "I forgot I did that," she whispered. "You forgot a lot," I said gently, "but forgetting doesn't mean it's gone." As we walked through the center, memories resurfaced. Some sweet, some painful, but all real. When we gathered again at the entrance, I asked, "So, what's your decision?" Amanda looked at Christopher. He looked at her, and for the first time in years, I saw them communicate without anger or competition. "We need time," Amanda said. "Not much, just tonight." "That's fair," I replied. They left quietly. No shouting, no demands, just silence, heavy, uncertain, fragile. That night, for the first time since inviting them, I felt a mixture of hope and fear. Hope that they might choose growth, fear that they might choose greed. But whatever happened next, I was ready, because I knew something they didn't. The estate wasn't the only surprise waiting for them. Months passed. The lawsuit dragged on like a never-ending storm, draining everyone's energy. Yet, in the middle of it all, I found peace, because for once, I had nothing to hide. My intentions were clear. I hadn't stolen anything. I hadn't deceived anyone. I had simply tested my family's loyalty, and they had failed spectacularly. One day, my lawyer, Miss Patel, called. "Congratulations, Mr. Simmons," she said with a smile in her voice. "The court has ruled in your favor. The will stands as valid and untampered." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Thank you, Miss Patel. Truly. The estate is yours to allocate as you wish. You can evict them immediately if you choose." I thought for a moment. Eviction. The very word carried weight. But anger wasn't what I wanted anymore. I'd seen how greed had corroded them. Throwing them out would only prove that bitterness had corroded me too. "No," I said quietly. "Let them stay, but under new terms." That evening, I invited them all back to the house for one final family meeting. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same living room where they'd once shouted at me was now silent with tension. When they arrived, I stood beside the fireplace, the golden light flickering over the polished floorboards. "I want to clear the air," I began. "The court confirmed that the property is mine. I could remove you all today if I wanted to, but I won't. Instead, I've decided on something else." Their eyes darted nervously. "What are you planning now?" Brian asked with an edge in his voice. "I'm giving you one more chance," I said, "to earn your inheritance." "Earn it?" Sarah scoffed. "We've already earned it. We're your family. Family isn't just blood," I replied softly. "It's loyalty. It's respect. It's love. Even when you disagree. None of you have shown that. But if you want another chance, I'm offering it." I handed each of them an envelope. Inside, there was a challenge written in my handwriting, each one different, tailored to their weaknesses. To Brian, start a charity using your own money. Help others before helping yourself. To Sarah, spend 6 months working in a senior care home. Learn humility and empathy. To Emma, complete your art program and host an exhibit that's not for profit. They looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "If you complete your challenge within a year," I continued, "you'll each receive a share of the remaining estate. Not just money, but responsibility. But if you don't, it all goes to charity." Brian slammed his envelope on the table. "This is insane. You think you can make us jump through hoops for what's rightfully ours?" "What's rightfully yours?" I echoed, shaking my head. "You've had everything handed to you your entire lives. The house, the education, the security. Yet you treated it like a burden. This isn't about money anymore. It's about character. For the first time, Emma spoke, her voice trembling. Dad, maybe he's right. Maybe this is our chance to fix things. Brian glared at her. You're taking his side now? She met his eyes calmly. I'm tired of fighting. That night, they left in silence, each carrying their envelope, and perhaps a flicker of guilt. In the weeks that followed, I watched from a distance. Brian tried to ignore the challenge, but something changed when one of his business deals failed. He started volunteering, reluctantly at first, but soon found himself helping rebuild community centers for underprivileged kids. Sarah complained endlessly about her work in the care home, but slowly, the residents began to soften her. And Emma thrived. She poured her heart into her art and finally hosted a small exhibition that brought people to tears. A year passed. The day came when I called them back again. They entered quietly this time. No anger, no shouting, just a quiet understanding in their eyes. I did it, Sarah said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. I didn't think I would, but I did. Brian nodded too. And I guess I learned something about responsibility. Emma smiled. We all did, Dad. Tears stung my eyes. I reached under the table and pulled out the final folder, the real estate documents. I'm proud of you, I said. And as promised, here's your reward. But it's not just money. It's partnership. From now on, the estate will be managed jointly. You'll each oversee one portion: maintenance, charity funding, and community outreach. They looked shocked. You mean you're trusting us again? Yes, I said, smiling. Because trust is something that can be rebuilt, one honest act at a time. For the first time in years, there was peace in the room. Genuine, healing peace. After they left, I sat by the window, watching the evening sun dip behind the trees. My heart was full, not because I had won, but because I had finally taught them something that would last longer than any fortune: the value of integrity. I whispered to myself, it was never about the money, it was about the legacy. But there was still one final twist left in the story, something none of them knew yet, something that would change everything once again. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of calm that only comes after a storm. Sunlight poured through the curtains, painting soft gold on the old oak floor. The air felt lighter, like the house itself could finally breathe again. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, the same table where countless arguments had once echoed. Now, it was quiet, peaceful, but I still had one thing left to do: the final surprise, the real ending no one expected. I took out a sealed letter from my desk drawer. It was marked with a single line: to be opened after my passing. I had written it months ago, when I began planning everything. Inside that letter were the details of the true inheritance, the $2 million I had kept secret even from my lawyer. You see, what everyone thought was the estate, the house, the land, the savings, was only part of the picture. I had invested quietly years ago in a tech startup founded by an old friend. It had grown beyond my wildest imagination, and when it went public, my shares became worth a small fortune. But I didn't reveal that. Not yet. I wanted to see if my children could change without the lure of instant wealth. I wanted them to rediscover who they were without money whispering in their ears. Now that they had finally grown, I decided it was time. That afternoon, I called them over again. They arrived, still cautious but warmer than before. Emma hugged me first, something she hadn't done in years. Dad, she said softly, thank you for not giving up on us. I smiled. It's a parent's job to keep believing, even when the children stop deserving it. They sat down, expecting maybe another lecture or moral lesson. But this time, I had something else in mind. I told you before that honesty would bring rewards, I began. You've proven you can change. So now, it's time I tell you the truth, the full truth. I reached into the drawer and placed 3 envelopes on the table, just like the first time. Their names were written on each, in neat ink. What's this? Brian asked, his brow furrowing. The rest of the story, I said. Open them. They tore them open. expecting maybe letters or sentimental words. Instead, each found a document inside, a financial statement, showing their names listed as beneficiaries of a trust fund worth $2 million. For a moment, silence filled the room. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the distant hum of traffic outside. Then, Sarah gasped, "Dad, this can't be real." "It's very real," I said. "But there's something you should understand first. That money isn't just a gift, it's a responsibility. It's meant to fund causes that matter. You each have a part of it, but it must be used wisely." Brian looked stunned. "So all this time, you had more money? And you let us think the estate was everything?" "Yes," I nodded. "Because I wanted to see who you'd become when you thought there was nothing left. And I'm proud to say, you didn't disappoint me in the end." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You were testing us the whole time?" "Not testing," I corrected. "Teaching. There's a difference." They sat in stunned silence. No one knew what to say. The same children who once fought tooth and nail over an empty house now stared at the papers in disbelief, but not greed. This time, there was gratitude in their eyes. Sarah whispered, "I don't deserve this." "Yes, you do," I said gently. "Because you found humility. You learned to care. You all did." For the first time, Brian reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. "I'm sorry, Dad. For everything. For the anger, the greed, the words I said." I smiled, my heart swelling with warmth. "Apology accepted. You've grown up, son." As the evening sun began to fade, laughter slowly filled the room. Hesitant at first, then full and genuine. It had been years since we'd sat together like that. Just a family, no hidden motives, no shouting, no walls between us. Later that night, when they had all left, I went out to the porch with a glass of water and looked up at the stars. My wife had loved nights like this. I could almost hear her voice in the wind. "You did it, John. You brought them back together." I whispered into the stillness. It wasn't me. It was time. Time and a little bit of faith. I closed my eyes, thinking of all that had happened. The anger, the betrayal, the lessons, the forgiveness. It had taken years, but in the end, they had understood what truly mattered. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this story wasn't just about inheritance. It was about how love, when tested, can come back stronger, purified through pain and time. Months later, after I passed away peacefully in my sleep, they found the sealed letter in my drawer. In it, I had written one final message. "To my children, you once fought over an estate that you believed was empty. But now you understand, real wealth is not in property or gold. It's in forgiveness, in unity, in the courage to start over. The $2 million I leave behind is not a prize. It's a promise. A promise that you'll carry this lesson forward. Use it to help others find what we almost lost, family." They cried as they read it. Not because of the money, but because they finally understood. And from that day on, the Simmons family was no longer defined by greed or grudges, but by compassion. The estate became a home again, not a battlefield. Nay,